In this video, I discuss the dark side of early retirement. Coming up next on Holy Schmidt.
Holy Schmidt!
To many, early retirement represents the holy grail. The master plan worked. You scrimped, you saved, you postponed, you paid down your mortgage faster than you needed to. A lot of good things happened, and now the payout is in front of you. You're now able to do what you want, when you want, how you want, and you'll never have to work a day again in your life. But be careful what you ask for, because too much of a good thing might in fact be a very bad thing if you're not careful. Now let's get into it, but before we do, please make sure you click the like button. YouTube uses the number of likes in its algorithm to determine how popular a video is, and I want to help as many people as possible. All right, here we go. Point number one is that you are going solo. Your friends and family are still working. What are you going to do from 9 to 5, and who are you going to do it with? Imagine day one of early retirement. You get up around 8, you head down to the kitchen, you open the newspaper, and you start reading. Then you see an article that reminds you of a friend. So you call your friend, but they can't talk. They're fighting a deadline, dealing with a resignation, and trying to clear out last week's emails that they forgot to get to. At the same time, they tell you how jealous they are about how you've cracked the code in early retirement while they're still grinding away. But they do agree to meet you for lunch. At that point, you're feeling flattered. Sort of. That's fine, you can meet them later. You head to the gym because one of the things that you've decided to do now that you're retired is get in shape. You go through the workout routine that they set you up on last week, but you notice at 10:30 in the morning there isn't anyone there. And after a few days of doing this, you start to lose motivation because there's just no energy. Lunchtime rolls around and your friend calls you and says that they're running late. No problem, you say, I have all the time in the world. So they push it about 30 minutes. So by the time you meet, they have 15 minutes or so before they have to leave to get back to the office. So you listen while they talk because they're the ones with the time constraint, and you don't really get much out of it, other than to find out that they have a report due at 1:30 that afternoon. After lunch, you head over to the park to walk your dog alone. 3 times more that same week, you take your dog to the park to walk them alone. There are only so many times you can walk around the park in a given week before things start to get very, very boring. You head home, you surf the internet for a few hours, and you watch television. Finally, before dinner, you meet your friend for a drink after work. They have a lot to say, but none of it relates to you anymore. They talk about gossip. They talk about who's getting promoted, who may be getting fired, who's dating who, and the deadlines that the new boss puts on them that the old boss never did. They talk about how much they love or hate the new boss, their snarky coworker in the cube next to them, etc. You offer up the article for them to read that you clipped out of the newspaper earlier that day. This happens day after day, week after week, month after month, and very quickly you realize that you're not in the club anymore, and they're not ready to join yours. Retirement can be lonely and boring if you don't have a plan for your days. This leads to point number 2. I call it lonely at the top. People get very lonely in retirement, and they do things that they wouldn't consider if they were working. Let me explain. Oftentimes, people in retirement move to get closer to people who have the same situation as they do. Retirees, potentially early retirees, all move to a similar community. But with the move comes additional challenges. Friends and family are largely gone. The weather is different if you head south. The community is different if you move from a city to the country or vice versa. People make a lot of decisions when they're lonely that they should wait to make until they've adjusted to the new schedule. This leads us to point number 3, the issue about your spending and the timing of your spending. If you're retiring early, most of your adult life, probably you spent saving for this day. You had more coming in than going out, so you felt wealthy. Every day you were saving a little bit more. And as you looked at your brokerage statements or your 401k statement or your pension statement, things were looking better and better and better. You were happy with the progress you were making. Now the day has come for you to spend from your accumulated assets, but you don't know how long you're going to be in retirement. If you plan for a long retirement and it turns out to be shorter than expected, you're leaving money and enjoyment on the table. If you plan for a shorter retirement based on things like family history, etc., and realize that maybe medical technology has caught up and you have more life than savings left, well, you're in a different type of predicament. Most people, I would say, fall into category 2. They're concerned that they're going to outlive their money, and so they're very frugal, at least in the initial years. But this means that you can't do a lot of the things that you wanted to do in retirement, unfortunately. And then there's point number 4. Early retirement brings with it a whole host of problems related to stepping out of the game before society says it's time to step out of the game. You can't really touch your retirement accounts until you're 59 and a half, most of the time anyway, unless you're willing to deal with an early withdrawal penalty or additional taxes potentially if you take it too fast. Add to that the lost growth that comes from taking your funds early on the funds that you do take early, using the rule of 72 and assuming that you had a 5 or 6% return. That means that you would double your assets every 12 years or so. If you take 6, 8, 10 years off of that, well, you're not doubling your assets if you're using the assets. By the way, if you don't know what the rule of 72 is, it's simply 72 divided by your return. If you had a 10% return, you divide 72 by 10, and that means that you double your investment assets every 7.2 years. The other point, which may be obvious, but I'll make it anyway, if you stop working early, it means that you're contributing less to your overall savings and using your savings earlier. A double whammy when it comes to retirement savings. And then what about Social Security? If you retire early, does that mean that you draw Social Security early? Well, if you can afford to retire early, perhaps taking Social Security later is the way to go because you build your payment. A lot to think about when it comes to timing on Social Security. I also think it's worth pointing out retirement assets can be passed down, but Social Security payments cannot, unless you're talking about the survivor benefit. Then there's point number 7, the point about your health. The National Bureau of Economic Research says that when someone retires, particularly if they retire early, their mobility slows down, their cognitive engagement slows down, and both of those, along with additional stress factors that may not exist when you're working, causes a health decline in many individuals. Heart disease, strokes, etc. become quite common amongst retirees, unfortunately. And despite all good intentions, the fact is retirees don't keep up with the physical level of activity with their job much of the time. Office politics, walking to and from the cafeteria, walking over to the building next door, going up to the 33rd floor, down to the 15th floor, or something in between. All of that kept you active and kept you engaged. None of that exists anymore. Add to that family commitments, social commitments, business commitments, conferences, travel related to conferences. All of the things about being in the game are now gone. Even just the pure intellectual curiosity of the stuff happening around you as you commute into and out of the office every day, that's also gone. Something as simple as a political billboard can bring up days of conversation, weeks of conversation in fact, but you won't see the billboard if you're not traveling to the office. The next point is health insurance. In early retirement, health insurance is not easy to come by. This one is often overlooked, and frankly the retiree scrambles near the end after they've made their plans and announcements to secure health insurance. It happens all of the time. Once you depart your employment, health insurance usually departs with it, unless you have a pre-agreed structure with your employer, either through a union contract or a pension agreement. I know this is obvious to a lot of people, but this is the time in your life where health insurance is very, very expensive. Why? Because at age 65, Medicare kicks in, but leading up to age 65, all of the stuff that gets covered on a medical plan can be very expensive. Some people get on their spouse's plan. What if that's not an option? The bottom line is that even if you don't work in your current job, it still might make sense to ease into retirement. Consult, start a business, or just work part-time. The pros could very well outweigh the cons in this decision, at least until your friends catch up and join the retirement club with you. It's lonely at the top. If you like this video, please make sure you click subscribe and notifications so that you get alerted the next time I post a video. Retirement information is changing fast, and I work very hard to get what's out there in here for you. This is Jeff Schmidt. Thanks for watching.